All right, we are good. We're going to start. Y'all ready to start? All right, I am going to introduce our Passover scholar, who is our former Peter scholar. Keith is going to walk us through Passover, its significance. I don't really know what he's going to say, but it'll be you for the passion that you have placed in him for your word and your history and your tradition. Lord, we ask that you would bring that out and impart that to us this morning in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Shalom.
Shalom.
Do we know? No. Today I'm rabbi. So, I asked Todd, if he'd be okay with me doing a little, basically a history lesson on the Passover and its significance. Todd reluctantly allowed me to do it because he's just so bored when he has nothing to prepare for. So he reluctantly allowed me to come in this week and next week and talk about this. And the reason I felt it important is it seems like whenever we sit down in discussion, people are kind of, especially men's group, we ask questions. Why do we say this during our liturgy? Why are these words mentioned? And I feel if we have a little knowledge background of the context in which they are spoken, then we might understand a little bit better. And I want to be able, today I want to do the history on Passover, and then next week I want to carry it into the New Testament. So I don't know if y'all know that it actually is the 6th day of Passover right now. It started Monday. And I know that sounds odd, that it's the 6th day of Passover, and it started 7 days ago. That is significant if you're reading the Bible and traditions and how they talk about days. Today is actually the year 5784 in the Hebrew calendar, for what it's worth. Our calendar right now is a solar calendar. We live in a Gregorian calendar. We have 12 months. We lose a few minutes every year, so once a year we add another day. The Jewish calendar was a lunar calendar based on the phases of the moon. Once every 4 years, they added a whole nother month. So when you read in the Bible and they say, the 10th day of the first month, well, it could change because they could add a month sometime. And their days don't start until sundown. So Monday, the first day of Passover, didn't start until sundown Monday. And there's actually a definition for sundown. When you walk outside in the evening and you can actually spot 3 stars in the sky, it is now officially sundown. So Sunday won't start until the sun sets tonight in the Hebrew calendar. Now they've obviously adapted to modern times. And so it just starts on April 22nd and will end on evening of Tuesday next week. What we see here is what everybody, Jewish family, set on their tables Monday evening or Tuesday evening or maybe both evenings, depending on how they celebrate Passover. I'm going to go through it later, the little Passover thing, kind of get an idea of what they go through. And and doing it 2 days in a row, I'm sure, is tedious. I have read things. They try to make it fun the next day and all this. It is very long. We will not take that long today, or we will be here till about 1 o'clock. So these traditions around Passover started 3,000 years ago. Todd did a decent job, I think, a very good job over Lent of taking us through the first 5 books of the Bible. And if you remember in that, he talked about how the Israelites found themselves in Egypt through the person of Joseph, and then some 430 years later found themselves as slaves running away from Egypt, escaping through Moses. If you remember, which I'm sure y'all do, through Moses, God told Pharaoh, "Let my people go, or bad things are going to happen." Pharaoh refused. These are all the bad things that happened. All these plagues. But we're going to look at the death of the firstborn because that's when Passover took place. In Exodus 12, it explains to us that before this happens, before the angel of death is going to pass through Egypt, God is going to instruct the Israelites to do very specific things so they are protected from this plague. In Exodus 12, it tells us that they are on the 10th day of the first month, they're going to select a lamb. Very specific lamb. It's got to be 1 year old, it has to be a male, and it can't be gimpy. No gimpy goats. It has to be without blemish. Or one-eyed chickens. Yeah. So, 1 year old male without blemish. They do that on the 10th day of the month. On the 14th day of the month, 4 days later, they are to sacrifice this animal. When they kill the lamb, they are to take a hyssop branch, very specific, a hyssop branch, and paint the blood on the doorposts and the lintel. So on the sides and the top of the doors. Now they are to eat the lamb with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Not only are they to eat it, they have to consume all of it. If they cannot eat it all, in fact, they even made provisions. If you've got a small family, you can go to somebody else's house and share this meal, because but it has to be in the house. And then it's God calling. So if you can't consume all of this meal, you have to burn it before the sun comes up the next day. It's all very specific things. So later on, when God tells Moses and Aaron that they are to memorialize this once they get in the desert, they are to remember this and memorialize it. He adds one more thing about the sacrificial lamb. None of its bones can be broken. So he adds one little caveat to it. The next kind of thing we see is in the book of Leviticus. It establishes another title for this. On the 14th day of the month, it becomes what they call the Lord's Passover. So they change it just a little bit and call it the Lord's Passover. This is kind of boring, but this is all background to where we're getting to, and then we're going to bring it all together next week, so get this background. So the Lord's Passover takes place, and the next 7 days is going to be called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, 2 years in the desert, the Lord again orders Passover on the 14th day, but once again, lamb without broken bones, bitter herbs, unleavened bread, fully consumed. But he's making provisions on who can partake in this and who can't. In other words, foreigners can't come and sit at your table, only Israelites. If you have slaves, there's a certain way to prepare them for them to come in and have this meal with you. And it's also some rituals now on how you can cleanse yourself if you consider yourself unclean to enjoy this Passover meal. Moses instructs them in Deuteronomy before he dies and before they go into the Promised Land. He changes it up just a little bit because at this point everybody's having this Passover meal in their tents, in their homes, as they did in Egypt on the night of the angel of death came through. But what he says now is that when they go in the Promised Land, they shall celebrate Passover at the place that the Lord God will choose to make his name dwell in it. There you shall offer the Passover sacrifice in the evening at sunset, and then the next day return to your tents. So he is establishing now Passover going to the temple. You're not in your homes anymore. Now you're sacrificing the lamb at the temple. And Joshua celebrates the first Passover when they enter into the Promised Land. And as soon as they celebrate that Passover, that first Passover, manna stops falling. God has now said, you guys are in the land where you need to be. You're in the land of plenty. I don't need to provide manna for you anymore. Passover isn't really mentioned a whole lot more until about 700 years later. And Todd's gone through this ad nauseum sometimes with how the tribes scatter. It's important to understand. They're always getting overrun. They're always scattering. God's bringing them back. scatter them again, coming back. And so all this is taking place, but in Ezekiel chapter 45, it's like 700 years after they enter the promised land, there's something else added to the Passover celebration. It's the first time ever that there's mentioned that there's a sin offering. So they're going to sacrifice a bull, and it's going to become part of the Passover celebration as a sin offering. The King Hezekiah in 2 Chronicles, about 200 years later, he attempts to bring all the tribes back by then setting the Passover being in Jerusalem again, at the temple. He's trying to collect them back. Obviously, it doesn't work because they're always scattered and running around, lost. But Hosea tried the same thing. About 100 years after that, he tried. He was actually renovating the temple. He wanted to, renovate it, and believe it or not, somehow along the way they lost the book of Deuteronomy and found it during the renovation temple. And it really caught his attention that the Passover has to be at a place the Lord chooses. So he once again said, we're bringing it back to the temple. We're going to do it here. And then about another 1,500 years go by until we're about 1,400 years ago, the Jewish community finally established, now keep in mind this is 600 years after Christ, established what the traditions that they use at Passover now. They tweak it every now and then, just like we do in our liturgy, to keep up with the politics and the feelings of the culture at the time. But this is what they came up with. 15 steps during this Passover meal. And with the help of Vanna White here, we're going to go through it, because I think the symbology of it is very significant, especially next week when we take this into the New Testament, once you see kind of the symbology that they're using here. So the first thing you have to do is you have to prepare. So what Jeanette's doing is she is setting up this Seder plate right here. On it, in clockwise order, is a lamb, in this case, a roasted chicken leg. This is all, these things happen for a reason. Or, keeping up with the times, you could use a roasted beet, because we have people that are vegetarians now. So a roasted beet can take place of the lamb bone or the chicken leg, so that there's no meat on there if you're a vegetarian household. I told you. Oh, I could go into more. It's kind of like the sparkle thing or whatever. They do some of that too, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to spare you all of that. So also on this plate is charoset. Beautiful, isn't it? It's a mixture of nuts, fruit, wine, and spices. Makes like kind of a little jelly thing. I've never had it, I don't think, but I hear it's the only tasty thing on this entire plate. Next is the bitter herbs. It's going to be typically a red or white horseradish. It's a radish. And then there's going to be a vegetable, parsley, or because this tradition went into Eastern Europe in the spring this time of year, they didn't have green vegetables. They didn't grow yet, so they use a potato. So this is how it evolves. Then there is an egg. It is not only hard-boiled, it is also roasted. Then there's a covered plate, and in it are 3 pieces of matzah bread. There's other matzah on the table. This is unleavened bread, and it's on the table. There's a bowl of salt water, very spooky bowl of salt water. And then there is a wine glass for each person. During this ceremony, each person is going to drink 4 glasses of wine. It's a lot of fun. You're going to be feeling, yeah, that's why we're not doing this today. Some of us have a service to go to. All right. Oh yeah, yeah, it's a little, yeah, kosher. But they also put grape juice in there, or whatever, because they don't want the 6-year-olds getting too out of control. The very first thing, the woman of the house is going to light 2 candles. We're not going to light them today because for the glasses of wine, I don't want any fire around. So after lighting the candles, there is a prayer that they say, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and command us that we light the holiday lights." Now we have to sanctify the day. Step 1. This is not even a step. This is just preparation for the step. So we have to sanctify the day. So I'm going to hold a cup of wine, and we're going to recite, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. Thank you, Lord, for the fruit of the vine." Then there's going to be some other blessings, and then we're going to drink it and refill it because there's more. Step 2, hand washing. Well, you're fixing to have a meal, so you want to wash your hands. And it's very specific. You just pour water over your hands. That's it. It's a ritualistic cleansing. I know it might sound familiar for the people with the collars back there. So then you take the potato in this case, and you dip it in the salt water. Step 3, dipping parsley in salt water. The parsley symbolizes the humble origins of the Jewish people, as well as the welcoming of spring. The salt water symbolizes the tears that were shed during their slavery in Egypt. Before eating the vegetable, we say, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the earth." And then we can eat the vegetable. Now, step 4, we reach unto the matzah. We take the middle one out. We're not going to break it in 2 because it's plastic and I want somebody to get hurt. But it will be broken in half. I got you. 1 half is going to go back in there. The other half is going to be hidden. It's going to be hidden. We're going to hide it. And in some houses, they hide this thing, and the children have to go find it, like an Easter egg hunt, because we're going to have to ransom it later.
So there's only one matzah for the group, however big the group?
Oh, no.
There's the 3, but that half, there's only
That
one
half
group?
is the 1 half that stays here.
Okay, for the whole
Now-
group, though. Not everybody does it. Okay.
Nope, this is just, this is all symbolic. Now, everybody else has their matzah, and there's going to be a whole meal and everything, but this is all the ritualistic stuff that's going on. So now, they're going to tell the story of Passover. And it's going to be done in a question-answer type format. There's going to be questions. The youngest child is going to ask a question, why is this night different from all other nights? They're going to talk about why they're eating matzah, why they're eating this instead of normal food, And then everybody's going to answer the questions. They're also going to possibly role play during this. Someone's going to play the wise child who asks the question, what are the laws that God has commanded us? Somebody's going to play the wicked child and ask, what does this Passover service mean to you? Then there's going to be we got 3 of them, simple child. What is the Seder service? And then there's going to be a child who doesn't know how to ask. So it sets up all the adults to be able to teach their children about the Passover and the Seder meal. I am not going to go through the whole story of Passover because this page is long, and besides, you already know it. However, in this tradition, when they get to the plagues, whoever is leading is going to take a drop of wine out of his cup and mention each plague in a row So he's going to drop 10 drops of wine from his cup. And then he's going to talk about once again, pages of running away from Pharaoh, escaping into the desert, etc. Now, there was a rabbi named Gamaliel. He was the head of the Sanhedrin right about the end of the Second Temple period. So around, I believe, 1st century. And he determined that you have to discuss the symbols, which is important. The Pesach, or the Paschal, is the shank bone, or in this case, the chicken leg. It represents the lamb that was sacrificed when God passed over the Israelites. The matzah, the unleavened bread, represents the hurried exit from Egypt. They left in such a hurry that God told them, you guys are going to be going fast. You don't have time for your bread to rise. Just take flour and water and go. Because if you want to make bread in the desert, you're going to have to take time and let it rise so that you can bake it later. They didn't have time for that, so that represents how fast they left. When Pharaoh finally said, all right, get out, they ran. And it's a good thing they ran fast because Pharaoh was on their heels. The bitter herbs reminds us of the pain that the Israelites suffered when they were as slaves. We now say a blessing over the second cup of wine. Once again, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. And then we drink the second cup of wine. Now we get to go to step 6, where we wash our hands again. We say this blessing after she is done. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his laws and commanded us to wash our hands. Now we have a blessing before the meal itself. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings bread from the earth. Now we have a specific blessing for the matzah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his laws and commanded us to eat matzah. We now can take the matzah that we have and pass it out among all the people at table. So they're going to break this up and pass it out to everybody. After that, we're going to eat the bitter herbs. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his laws and commanded us to eat bitter herbs. So now they're going to eat the horseradish. Now, here's something else that was added around the 1st century. There was this sage called Hillel, and he thought it'd be a good idea to take that jello stuff and place it between 2 pieces of matzah. That now symbolizes the mortar that symbolizes the bricks that the Israelites made when they were slaves in Egypt. So they basically have a mortar sandwich. Finally, step 11, we get to have dinner. And the Passover dinner is served. I looked at some of the recipes. It looks quite yummy, actually. Now, God, it was hidden so well I lost it. The piece that was hidden is now brought out. And now we're going to eat this as dessert. So after a meal, we're going to take a piece of bread that has been hidden, and we're going to pass it out as dessert. Now we're going to refill a cup of wine. The 3rd cup of wine is now filled. We're going to say grace. Are you feeling left out over there? Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sustains the entire world with goodness, grace, loving kindness, and compassion. He gives bread to all. His grace is everlasting. And it goes on. It's quite a blessing. Then we say, blessed are you, Lord our God, as we always do, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. We now get to drink the 3rd cup of wine. We're feeling good right now. Now, we fill the cup of wine again, as well as a 5th cup of wine. This cup is Elijah's cup. So we'll fill that up. We will not drink that because that's not ours. That's Elijah's. And someone's going to go open the door so Elijah can come in. Because what we're waiting on is we're waiting for Elijah to walk through that door and tell us the Messiah has come. Because remember, he hasn't come yet for this ceremony. So that's why we have opened that door. We're waiting for Elijah to still announce the coming of the Messiah, which in their tradition he has not done yet. We now go through a number of praises and blessings, and then we bless the fourth cup of wine as we did in the past. We get to drink it. We now conclude the Seder with a final prayer asking God to enter us into the Messianic era. We're going to once again ask him to bring the Messiah to us and into the world. Now we have finished Passover, but we got a lot of songs we can sing if we'd like, but we're not going to. Because I promised Jeanette I wouldn't take more than 30 minutes to do this. So this is all background. I know it's kind of tedious and hopefully it was interesting, but I'm setting the background so that we can talk about this, the significance of what this is going to do for us next week as we enter into the New Testament and the Messianic era as we see it. So that's all I've got. Yes, sir.
Is it always on that April 22nd? Or
No.
does it vary based on?
No, it varies. It could vary by month because it's based on the phases of the moon. April 22nd was the fourth phase of the moon this year, but sometimes you have that blue moon, so you get 2 full moons in 1 month. The Jewish months are much shorter. They're only like 29 days. All of them, we have 30, 31 days. So they base it on the phases of the moon, so sometimes there's 13 months in the year. So it could actually fall. Our April right now we're in the month, the first month of the Jewish Hebrew year, which is Nisan. However, like the first few days of our April, was the end of their Adar 2. So it's just all mixed up. So sometimes, if you go through, but sometimes you'll find it actually falls into a slightly different month, depending on the first moon, if that makes sense.
They do this twice, you said?
Sometimes they do it on Monday, sometimes they'll do it on Tuesday, sometimes they'll do it both Monday and Tuesday. It depends on the family. It also depends on the sect. Some Jewish sects, it's only 7 days long, others it's 8 days long. So it all depends. There's so many varied traditions on how they do this, but it's my understanding that, in fact, I come across a lot of things where they're like, oh, not 2 days in a row, please, can't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like doing Thanksgiving dinner twice.
Yes, sir. Yeah, exactly. With all the wine.
Hey Keith, when they drink the wine, do they just sit around sipping the wine? Do they like shotgun this?
Oh, no, depends on how much you want to put in it, but they'll shotgun that. Now, during the meal, they're also consuming wine. This is just the ritualistic wine that they'll drink. So they'll just drink it right then, But during the meal, they also have their own little separate wine cups. So you can sit there and drink the non-ritualistic wine during the meal or while people are talking. But those are, you don't have to fill them. And you can use small cups. You can use little cups. Yes, Pat?
Were you here when we used to do that on a regular basis every
What,
year?
the Seder?
Yeah, the Seder
No,
supper.
We did that for years.
Oh,
For
cool.
years,
So
we did that, yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
They did it here. We did it here one time.
Yeah.
We did it here a lot.
A lot of times.
Yeah, we
I
did
only
it here.
remember one in the 60s probably.
no,
So you probably
we-
did it after I was.
Yeah, because we didn't come until
We always did it
the
on Monday, Thursday.
Yeah.
on Maundy,
And
Thursday.
that makes sense.
And Agnes would make the most awesome matzo ball soup.
Yeah.
Brought in a
Yeah.
rabbi. Did they bring in a rabbi?
Yes, not every year, but we did it several years. And then we had the Jews for Jesus people came a couple of times. It was a really,
Yeah,
it was a big deal.
I did it once when I was 14 or something like that.
Yeah,
And all I remember is the piece of bread that was hidden, the bitter herbs, and the wine. I was like, oh my gosh.
and the bitter herbs herbs and the salt, and what else did we do? We had matzah.
Horseradish. yeah.
Horseradish.
Horseradish, about
Yeah,
5 or 6.
and then we had the
lots of
matzah
soup, too.
bread, and then
Yeah, and
then the soup.
there's a
and
piece
then-
of lettuce on there too, and that's
Yeah.
kind of what if you have just horseradish, you would spread it on the lettuce and eat it like that.
Yeah, we did that every year,
Oh, no.
every Maundy Thursday.
It was rough.
Blow your head off.
But Father Lou, I think, had a really unique relationship with the Jewish community.
Oh, yeah?
And you don't remember any of that?
There used to be
I was too young.
You were here.
Oh, no, he was here when Father Lou was
Yeah.
here, so, yeah.
I started coming here in 95, so,
Yeah, it was wonderful, it was just amazing.
yeah, so,
We'd have
but I
the
think it's kind of
rabbis
cool if,
come in.
yeah, need a rabbi. That's not going to be me. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, oh, the soup was awesome, yeah.
My kids
Oh, like
love
they
that
say,
stuff.
matzo ball, chicken soup, it's kind of a, yeah,
piece of land.
But everything would have, it would mean something.
Yes.
no, not typically
Well-
for the meal. You can't have any bread, obviously. For 7 days, they can't have any bread, so everything has to be kosher. So if you use a soup that had like a gravy or something, you had to make sure it was unleavened. They go through the house and make sure all the leaven is out of the house. I mean, that was one thing I left out, but they had to go through every nook and cranny of their houses back in the day to make sure there was no leaven, no yeast, nothing in there that was leavened. They also, back in the early Jews, once they entered the house and had this meal, they couldn't take any of this out of the house. They had to consume it before sundown or sunrise. And it's like I said, you couldn't take it down to your neighbors. It could not leave the house. You just any part of that meal you could not take out of your house. All kinds of interesting traditions, but I just think it's fun to relate some of these traditions to our Eucharistic service. And I think it's kind of important to see how it kind of plays in, because a lot of people just don't understand why we do what we do during the service. But if you put it in this context, especially after next week, I hope it all kind of makes sense. Anything else? You guys want to go to church? You guys want to go have a glass of wine? Later, in about a year, we can all share some wine, or about an hour, we can share some wine. Thanks, y'all.
All right, Keith, thank you. I think Keith did a decent job.
But Jeanette really,
Yeah, she made the day, yeah.
Michelle's really got to step up her game.
Right?